Hola, viva lunes. Hoy vamos a repasar el subjuntivo. Necesitas el papel amarillo para completar los apuntes. Ok, un repaso rápido. ¿Cómo formamos el subjuntivo? Ok, es como formar los mandatos. Empezamos con la forma de yo. En el presente indicativo, quitamos la O y ponemos las terminaciones opuestas. También ustedes necesitan recordar todos los irregulares, ¿ok? Verbos como car, buscar, que terminan con ser, como conocer, sir, gar, gir, her, sar, okay? There's a couple on here you'll need to add to your paper. Ya sabemos algunos básicos del subjuntivo. We use it to express doubt or uncertainty, which we'll get into in more depth down the road. Opinion, which we talked about before spring break. One thing that we quickly discussed is the need to have two different subjects. So you have to have another subject. When you do that, you're going to separate both parts of the sentence with the word que. Subjunctive with impersonal expressions. You know many of these phrases, these are just some as a reminder. Es bueno que, es malo que, es importante, increíble, posible, trágico. Okay? Es una lástima, lamentable, es raro, es mejor, etc. Okay? There's plenty more that you should remember, or perhaps not, but there's more than this. Remember, with these expressions, we just take the expression as is with the word que, and we're going to have a second part of the sentence. Aquí están algunos ejemplos. Okay, take a moment to try to answer these, or excuse me, to translate these into Spanish. Remember, we're going to follow that same thing that I just talked about. You're going to use the impersonal expression, es, the adjective, then que. Then you need to complete the rest. So include the subject if it's necessary. For some, it is necessary. The verb and then the remaining part of the sentence. Remember that the second verb here is going to be in the subjunctive because we're using an impersonal expression. I'm going to move on, but if you want to write yours down and check your work, then you can pause. Okay. Es mejor que los estudiantes duerman. Okay, so of course we're going to put this in the subjunctive. And we're going to make sure we put los estudiantes in there because the verb duerman could indicate several people if we don't already know who we're talking about. Número dos. Es bueno que tengamos una escuela grande. Here I don't have to put nosotros before tengamos because it's implied within the verb itself. Tres. No es necesario que tú comas manzanas. I did put the two in there, but you wouldn't need it. You do need a period, but I forgot it. Lo siento. Okay, continuamos. We're going to start with the second use. Okay, there's 5 total that we're going to learn. The first one was subjunctive with impersonal expressions. Now it's subjunctive with to express hope, excuse me. O en español es expresar esperanza. Okay. Basic rule with this, which is similar to what I just talked about with impersonal expressions, is the beginning of the sentence, the first half of the sentence is going to use the indicative of the verb. Okay, you may not know what indicative is or remember what it is, but the indicative is what you have been learning since Spanish 1. Okay, all the present tense, the preterite, the imperfect, all of that, that's considered the indicative. The other mood, as they're called, is the subjunctive mood. And the third mood is command, which you've learned, okay? So I'll be using the word indicative and subjunctive a lot. So the first half of the sentence is in the indicative form, in the present tense. The second half is going to be with the subjunctive. You have to have two different subjects for each one, okay? So here's the formula. You'll need to add an extra line because I don't have enough lines for all these, but you're going to start with the first subject, okay? Subject number one, the verb of hope, and I'll show you what those are, separated by K, a different subject from the first one, and then the verb and the subjunctive. For example, or not for example, but verbs that express hope, there are several, but here's the only three that you need to worry about right now. Desear o no desear, querer o no querer, esperar o no esperar. So desear, desire, wish, to want, and esperar is to hope when it's used with subjunctive, okay? Now, as I stated, if I do not have a change in subject, then I am going to take the K out and I'm not going to use the subjunctive. I have some examples to follow. Okay, examples with sentences that have no change of subject. Maria espera visitar Europa. Here, the subject is the same. Okay, she hopes to visit. So we're just talking about Maria. Maria hopes to visit Europe. Alejandra desea ver una película. Alejandra wishes to see a movie. Okay, so if we're just using one subject, we will not go through all that mess to change it up and put the K and change the verb. Un poco más. We talked a little bit about ojalá. Ojalá is a phrase that expresses hope. There's only one form of it and it's not conjugated. It, you can or cannot use it with K, you don't have to. And it's always, always used with a subjunctive. The direct translation is may God grant. Um, or in this case it was Allah because it's Arabic origins, but another way really that you're going to be thinking of is I hope or let's hope or also hopefully. So just a little bit of translation practice. I'm going to pull these up here, but I'm going to go through them. So I suggest you pause to write them down and then come back and check your work. These are examples of what I've been talking about where we have one subject, a verb of hope, separated by the word K, second subject, and then the verb put in the subjunctive. Okay? Take a moment to go ahead and try to do these. Okay, Señora LB hopes that her students speak Spanish well. La señora LB espera que los estudiantes hablen español muy bien. Okay, we're not going to say her. In Spanish, we're just going to use los. Okay, you may say it with sus estudiantes. That's fine. Hablen español. Okay, so here we have subject number one, verb of hope, separated by K. Second subject, different, and then the verb and the subjunctive. They do not want the test to be Monday. Ellos no quieren que el examen sea lunes. Okay? As you see here in English, it's to be. So you may have written ser, but in the subjunctive, or in Spanish, excuse me, you have to use a subjunctive in this case because we've got one subject here, verb of hope, separated, that would be separated by K, and a second subject in the verb. Now in English, we don't always use that, but in Spanish it needs to be used. We have two clauses here. We need to separate the clauses with K. Okay, we also have two subjects, which is why we have two clauses. I wish that people would recycle. Deseo que las personas reciclen. Here it's I, here it's the people, separated by K, and there's the verb and the subjunctive. Hopefully, ojalá que haga sol hoy. I wish that we'd rest on Saturdays. Now, the in English, we're using the conditional we would, but in Spanish, it's going to be the subjunctive. Deseo que descansemos los sábados. Okay, subjunctive, this is use number 3. You may need to take a breather in between these. But use number 3 is with verbs of influence. Okay, all those verbs we talked about, like in that song, exigimos. Those are verbs of influence or will, okay? So essentially, they're used to influence the action of others, like to prohibit, suggest, demand. Remember, the same formula has to follow. You have to have two different subjects separated by K in order to make the subjunctive work, okay? These are verbs that express influence. Aconsejar, these are all part of your vocab words that you just learned. Dejar, exigir, insistir, mandar, pedir, prohibir, recomendar, sugerir, necesitar, permitir. I don't remember if necesitar was in there, but that's one as well. Formula, exactly the same. We're going to have a subject, first subject, a verb of influence, one of these, in the indicative. So it'd be yo aconsejo, or yo dejo, or yo exijo, or yo insisto, separated by K, a different subject, and then the subjunctive. Okay, let's do some practice. I demand that the students study da da da. So I'm going to have you again pause and try to conjugate these, and then come back and, or excuse me, translate them and come back and check your work. I'm going to move ahead. So here we have subject, verb of influence, separated by that, second subject, verb. Okay, now here I put that in all of these, but in English, quite frankly, you're going to say, I demand you to study. Okay, or I demand the students to study. But in Spanish, it's going to come out looking like this. Yo exijo que los estudiantes estudien. Okay? With certain verbs, we have to use indirect object pronouns, and we'll talk more about that, but here we need to add that. So you suggest that I eat vegetables. I need to add this here, and we'll again talk about that later. Tú me sugieres que yo coma las verduras. We prohibit that people smoke. Prohibimos que las personas fumen en el edificio. Other notes quickly, just to compare with English. So in English, when you express what you want someone to do, you use an infinitive. Okay, I want you to do your homework. You express what you hope someone does with the present tense. I hope you study. And you express what you wish somebody would do with the conditional. I wish that you'd be quiet. Okay? But in Spanish, every single one of those situations, we're going to use the subjunctive. Okay, just some quick English versus Spanish examples. So I want Pablo to study. There's the use of the infinitive. Yo quiero que Pablo estudie. In Spanish, it's got to be like this, okay? You cannot say yo quiero Pablo estudiar. That doesn't make sense. With the present tense, I hope Pablo studies. Yo espero que Pablo estudie. And again, you can't say yo espero Pablo estudiar or estudia. And with conditional, you would just say okay, Pablo estudie. Okay? Just really quick other notes. Just remember that the indicative is used for the first verb because it states a fact. I hope, I wish, I want, etc. The subjunctive is used for the second verb because it expresses a possibility rather than a fact, and because there's a change in the subject. So we have two different subject changes there. Okay, so the second half of the sentence, to make it subjunctive, depends on the first half. Okay, now when you're done with this, you're going to move on to doing some additional homework. Adios. You don't have to do this. Ciao. Ciao.